we are. It's funny.
You go through life thinking you have everything figured out, you know? You have your routine. For me, that was work, home, and the gym. My name's John, by the way. I'm an architect. I spend most of my day hunched over a drafting table or staring at a computer screen, designing buildings that other people will live and work in. It's a good job, creative, pays the bills. But it's solitary, and it makes my back ache in a way that only a man approaching 40 can truly understand.
That's where the gym came in. Apex Fitness. Sounds generic, I know. But it was clean, close to my apartment, and mostly empty around the times I could go. It was my space to sweat out the stress of the day, to feel my body do something other than sit in a chair. For 2 years, it was just that. A place with machines and weights, a part of the routine. And then, about 6 months ago, they hired Alex.
You have to understand, I wasn't looking for anything. My love life, if you could even call it that, was basically in a long-term coma. A few bad breakups in my early 30s had left me feeling like maybe I was better off on my own. It was just easier, less drama, less disappointment. So I wasn't scoping out the gym for potential dates. But Alex, man, Alex was impossible to ignore. He wasn't a typical meathead trainer, all loud grunts and testosterone. He had this quiet confidence about him. He was probably in his late 20s, with thick, dark hair that was always a little messy, like he'd just run his hands through it. He had a kind face, a smile that actually reached his eyes, and a body that was, well, it was the reason most people came to a gym in the first place. He was lean but powerful, every muscle defined, not in a showy bodybuilder way, but in a functional, athletic way, like a swimmer or a dancer. He moved with this incredible grace, whether he was demonstrating a deadlift or just walking across the gym floor. For months, my interactions with him were limited to a friendly nod. "Hey, John," he'd say, and that warm, low voice would send this stupid little jolt through me. How did he even know my name? I figured he must have seen it when I scanned my key card. I'd just mumble a hey back and quickly get on the nearest treadmill, my heart beating a little faster than it should have been before a workout. I watched him, though. I couldn't help it. I'd watch how he was with his clients. He was patient, encouraging, never condescending. He had this way of making people feel comfortable, even the ones who were clearly new and self-conscious. He'd adjust someone's form with a light touch on their back or elbow, and it was always professional, always respectful. But there was an attentiveness there, an intensity in his focus that was captivating. He wasn't just going through the motions, he was genuinely invested in helping people. I'd imagine what it would be like to have that focus on me, to have him guide me, correct my form, tell me I was doing a good job, but I was too chicken to ever sign up for a session. It felt too intimate, too much of a spotlight. So I kept my distance, working out on my own, stealing glances when I thought he wasn't looking. He became this sort of silent motivation. I pushed myself harder, wanting to, impress the guy who didn't even know I was trying to impress him. It was pathetic, really, but it was my little secret, my harmless gym crush. That all changed on a Tuesday night in November. It was raining outside, one of those miserable, cold downpours that keeps most sane people at home. The gym was practically a ghost town. It was almost 9 o'clock, closing time, and besides me, there was only one other guy on the far side of the weight room, and Alex, who was wiping down some equipment. I finished my workout, feeling that good kind of tired, the kind where your muscles hum and your mind is finally quiet. I grabbed my towel and headed for the locker room. I was relieved to see it was empty. I hated the locker room shuffle, that awkward dance of trying not to make eye contact while you're both half naked and fumbling for your keys. The silence was nice. The only sounds were the distant hum of the ventilation system and the rhythmic drip of a leaky shower head. I peeled off my sweaty gym clothes, tossed them in my bag, and headed into the showers. The hot water was bliss, washing away the last of the day's tension. I leaned my head against the cool tile, letting the water run down my back, and just zoned out. I thought about a difficult blueprint I was working on, what I was going to have for dinner. The usual mundane stuff. I completely lost track of time. When I finally turned off the water, the silence in the locker room felt different. Heavier. I grabbed my towel, wrapped it around my waist, and pushed open the shower door, stepping out into the steamy air. And that's when I saw him. Alex. He was standing by the lockers, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. He wasn't looking at me, not at first. He was just packing his things, but he must have heard the shower door open because he turned his head. Our eyes met. And the world just sort of stopped. It was only for a second, maybe two. But in that second, 1,000 things happened at once. My brain went into absolute panic mode. He's seeing me, naked. Well, almost naked. My first instinct was to yelp and dive back into the shower, but I was frozen. My hand was clutching the towel around my waist like my life depended on it. And his expression, that's the part I'll never forget. It wasn't shock. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't even mild amusement. It was just calm, a quiet, steady gaze. His eyes, which I'd only ever seen from a distance, were a deep, warm hazel, and in that moment, they weren't looking at my body. They were looking at me. It felt like he was seeing right through the awkwardness, right through my panic, and into something deeper. And my face was on fire. I know I must have been beet red from my neck to my hairline. I opened my mouth to say something, probably something stupid like, sorry, or oh my God, but no words came out. Then he did something I never would have expected. He turned, walked to the main door of the locker room, the one that led back out to the gym, and he closed it. He didn't slam it. He just pushed it shut until I heard the soft, definitive click of the latch engaging. The sound echoed in the silent room. My heart, which was already hammering against my ribs, felt like it was going to explode. He closed the door. He closed us in, together, alone. My mind was racing, spinning a dozen different scenarios, each one more terrifying and exhilarating than the last. Was he angry? Was he going to yell at me for being in here so late? Was he? The thought was so audacious, so far beyond anything I had ever let myself imagine, that it almost made me dizzy. He turned back to face me. The room felt 10 times smaller than it had a minute ago. He took a slow step forward, then another. He stopped about 10 feet away, a safe distance. He wasn't smiling, but his expression was soft. Sorry, he said, and his voice was even lower, even richer than it was out on the gym floor. Didn't mean to startle you. I thought you had already left. I finally found my voice, though it came out as a squeak. No, it's my fault. I lost track of time. I was still clutching my towel, my knuckles white. It's no problem, he said. He gestured vaguely toward the door with his head. Just figured I'd give you some privacy. My boss is a stickler for locking up right at 9, and he was hovering out there. Oh, no. Of course, that was it. A simple, logical, professional reason. He was just being considerate. My brain deflated a little with disappointment, but it was also flooded with relief. It was a normal explanation. This was a normal situation. Well, as normal as standing nearly naked in front of your gym crush could be. Oh, right, thanks, I managed to say, feeling like a complete idiot. Don't worry about it, he said. He leaned back against the bank of lockers, crossing his arms over his chest. The pose was casual, relaxed, but it did incredible things to his biceps. I tried very, very hard not to stare. You had a good workout tonight. You've been really consistent lately. My head snapped up. He'd noticed my consistency. Yeah, I'm trying, I said, my voice still a little shaky. It shows, he said simply. Your form on the rows has gotten a lot better. He'd been watching my form. He'd been watching me work out. The thought sent another jolt through me, but this one was different. It wasn't just panic, it was a warm, spreading heat. Really? I asked, a stupid, hopeful smile probably spreading across my face. I've been watching some videos, trying to get the arch in my back right. He nodded, his gaze serious. You're getting it. You just have a tendency to pull a little too much with your arms at the end of the movement, instead of squeezing with your lats. It's a common mistake. And just like that, we were talking, really talking, for the first time. It was about something as mundane as weightlifting form, but it felt monumental. He wasn't talking to me like a trainer giving a generic tip. He was talking to me like an equal, like someone he had been observing, someone he had thoughts about. I always feel it more in my biceps than my back, I admitted, feeling a bit more daring. I took a step toward my own locker, suddenly remembering that I needed to get dressed. Next time you're in, find me, he said, his voice dropping a little lower. We can spend a few minutes on it, no charge or anything. I just hate seeing someone work so hard and risk getting injured. My brain short-circuited. Find me. He was inviting me to seek him out. He was offering me his time, his focus, the very thing I had been fantasizing about for months. I'd like that, I said, my voice breathy. Thank you. It's Alex, by the way, he said, even though I already knew his name, his schedule, and probably, if I was being honest with myself, what car he drove. "John," I replied, as if he didn't already know. "I know," he said, and this time he did smile. It was a small, almost shy smile, but it lit up his whole face. "See you around, John." He pushed off the lockers, gave me one last look, a look that lingered just a fraction of a second too long, a look that felt like it held a question, and then he turned and walked out, the door clicking softly shut behind him. I stood there for a long time in the silence, the steam from the shower dissipating around me. I was alone again, but everything was different. The air was buzzing, my skin was tingling. I wasn't just a random guy at the gym anymore. I was John and Alex. The guy I'd been admiring from a safe, comfortable distance had just closed the door and invited me into his world. The locker room didn't feel awkward or embarrassing anymore. It felt sacred. It was the place where my quiet, predictable routine had been shattered, and I had a feeling, a deep, thrilling, terrifying feeling, that nothing was ever going to be the same. I finally got dressed, my hands fumbling with my shirt buttons, my mind replaying every single word, every single look. The door was just a door again, but for me, it had become a threshold, and I had just been invited to cross it. Or the 48 hours after the closed-door incident, as I started calling it in my head, were a special kind of torture. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a waiting room. Every corner of it seemed to be judging my life choices. My drafting table, covered in the precise, logical lines of a new community center, felt like a mockery. How could I design a place for hundreds of people to connect when I could barely manage a coherent thought about one person? I replayed the scene in the locker room 1,000 times. I analyzed it from every angle, like a piece of difficult architecture. The way Alex stood, the tone of his voice, the exact duration of that final look. At first, I was flying high on the memory. He noticed me. He sees me. He offered to help me. It felt like a small, private victory. But then, the doubt started to creep in. Quiet at first, then deafening. He's a trainer. John, you idiot. It's his job to be friendly and encouraging. It's good for business. He probably says that stuff to everyone. And the door thing? He told you exactly why he did it. His boss was hovering. It was just professional courtesy. You're building a whole fantasy scenario out of a foundation of nothing. You're a 40-year-old man acting like a teenager with his first crush. Get a grip. This internal monologue was exhausting. At work on Wednesday, I completely messed up the HDAC plan for a new office building, putting a massive air duct right through the middle of the proposed executive washroom. My boss, a kind but perpetually stressed man named David, just looked at the blueprint, looked at me, and asked if I was feeling all right. I mumbled something about a headache and spent the next 3 hours fixing my mistake, my face burning with embarrassment. Thursday was even worse. I went to the gym out of sheer habit, but I chose a different time, early afternoon, knowing Alex worked the evening shift. I couldn't face him yet. I was too wound up. What if I saw him and he just gave me the standard, friendly nod? What if he'd already forgotten his offer? The thought of that casual dismissal after our intense moment felt like it would physically hurt. So I hid. I did a half-hearted workout, my eyes constantly scanning the entrance, and I felt like a coward. By the time Friday rolled around, I was a nervous wreck. "Find me," he'd said. It was an invitation, an instruction, all day at work. The words echoed in my head. It was a simple command, but it felt loaded with significance. It required me to be brave, to take a step, to close the distance I had so carefully maintained for months. I left work, went home, and stood in front of my closet for a solid 20 minutes. What do you wear to a prearranged, not a date, form check with the guy you can't stop thinking about? I settled on a simple gray t-shirt that fit well without looking like I was trying too hard, and my newest pair of black workout shorts. I looked at myself in the mirror. I still saw the same old John, a little softer around the middle than I'd like, with fine lines starting to form around my eyes. But maybe, just maybe, there was a little spark of something else there today. A flicker of hope. I walked into Apex Fitness at 7:30, right on schedule. The evening rush was in full swing. The place was buzzing with the clang of weights, the whir of treadmills, and the generic pop music they always played. It was loud and anonymous, and for a moment I felt my courage shrink. This was the real world, not the quiet, steamy sanctuary of the empty locker room. And then I saw him. He was on the other side of the gym, spotting a woman who was doing bench presses. He was in his element, completely focused. He leaned over her, his hands hovering just below the bar, his voice a low, encouraging murmur that I couldn't hear but could imagine perfectly. He was wearing a black tank top with the Apex logo on it, and the muscles in his back and shoulders moved with a smooth, powerful rhythm as he shadowed the weight. I just stood there for a minute, near the water fountain, trying to get my breathing under control. He was so professional, so competent. The doubt came rushing back. This is his office. You're just another client, just another piece of the workday. But then the woman finished her set, and Alex helped her rack the weight. He gave her a high five and a big, encouraging smile. And as he straightened up, his eyes scanned the gym. It was just a quick, sweeping glance, the kind a person in charge does. But his eyes stopped when they found me. The professional smile vanished. It was replaced by something else. Something smaller, quieter, but 100 times more potent. It was a smile just for me. His eyes crinkled at the corners, and he gave me a slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't just a hello. It was a there you are. It was a there you are. My heart did a little flip-flop. He remembered. He was expecting me. I nodded back, and he held my gaze for a second longer before turning back to his client to say a few more words. That one look was all I needed. It was my green light. I walked over to the cable machines, trying to look casual, and started setting up for my rows, just like we'd talked about. My hands felt clumsy, and I was pretty sure I put the pin in the wrong weight stack twice. A few minutes later, I heard his voice right behind me. Ready to fix that pull? I turned, and he was standing closer than I expected. I could smell the clean, faint scent of his soap. Yeah, I said, my own voice sounding a little too loud in my ears. If you have time. I've got time, he said, and his gaze was so direct it felt like a physical touch. All right, let's see your normal set. Don't think about it too much. Just do what you usually do. I sat down on the bench, grabbed the handle, and started pulling. I was acutely aware of him standing there, watching me. Every single muscle fiber in my body felt like it was under a microscope. I did about 10 reps, my form getting sloppier with each one, because I was so in my head. When I finished, I let the handle go with a clatter. See, I said, trying to make a joke of it. All arms. He chuckled. It was a warm, easy sound. I see a lot of effort, he corrected gently. That's the most important part. The technique, that's easy to teach. The will to actually do the work. That's what most people lack. His words hit me harder than I expected. He saw my effort. He valued it. Okay, he said, moving to stand beside me. Let's try it again. But this time, I want you to think about pulling your shoulder blades together before your arms even start to bend. Imagine you're trying to squeeze a pencil between them. He knelt down next to the bench, bringing himself to my level. His proximity was doing crazy things to my pulse. Here, he said, let me show you. He reached out and placed his hand flat against my back, right between my shoulder blades. My entire nervous system went into overdrive. His hand was warm and firm, the pressure steady. Even through the fabric of my t-shirt, I could feel the texture of his palm, the slight calluses on his fingers from years of handling weights. It was a completely professional, instructional touch. But to me, it was lightning. A current of heat spread from that single point of contact, radiating through my entire torso. Okay, he said, his voice low and close to my ear. Forget the handle for a second. Just focus on my hand. Squeeze your back muscles and try to push my hand away. I did as he said, focusing all my energy on the muscles in my back, squeezing them together. There, he said, his voice full of satisfaction. You feel that? That's the muscle I want you to use. Those are your lats and rhomboids doing the work. Yeah, I breathed out. I feel it. I feel it. Good. Now, grab the handle, and I want you to start the movement with that exact feeling. The handle just comes along for the ride. Your arms are just hooks. His hand stayed on my back as I took the handle and pulled. This time, it was completely different. I could feel the muscles deep in my back engage, a powerful contraction that had nothing to do with my biceps. Perfect, John, he said, his voice a low rumble against my back. That's it. See the difference? Wow, I said, genuinely amazed. Yeah, completely. I did a few more reps, and he didn't take his hand away. He just kept it there. A warm, guiding pressure, a silent reminder of what I was supposed to be feeling. With every pull, I was aware of two things, the powerful squeeze in my back, and the steady, grounding presence of his touch. It was the most focused I had ever been in the gym. It felt like, for those few minutes, The entire noisy, chaotic room had faded away, and it was just the two of us. When I finished the set, he finally removed his hand, and I felt its absence immediately. My back felt cold. He stood up, a proud smile on his face, like a teacher whose student had just had a breakthrough. "You're a fast learner." "I had a good teacher," I said, looking up at him. "And I didn't just mean for the exercise." We stood there for a moment in a comfortable silence. The professional part of the interaction was over, but neither of us moved to end it. "So," Alex said, breaking the silence as he leaned against a nearby machine. He crossed his arms, and I had to force myself to maintain eye contact. "An architect, huh? Must be cool. Designing things." My surprise must have shown on my face. "How did you know that?" He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I asked Sheila at the front desk. I was curious." He was curious. He had asked about me. The thought was like a shot of espresso straight to the heart. This wasn't just a friendly trainer making small talk. This was something more. "Yeah, it's what I do," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's mostly stress and impossible deadlines. But I like it. I like creating something solid, something that will hopefully outlast me." He nodded thoughtfully, his hazel eyes fixed on me. "I get that feeling of building something real. It's kind of what I try to do here, just with people instead of concrete and steel." And there it was, that connection. He understood. He saw the parallel. We weren't that different. He was an architect of the body, and I was an architect of buildings. We were both in the business of transformation. "I never thought of it that way," I admitted. "But you're right. But you're right. But you're right. But you're right." "What are you working on now?" he asked, and his interest felt completely genuine. He wasn't just filling time. So I told him about the community center project, about the challenges of creating a space that felt welcoming to everyone, from toddlers to seniors. I told him about the satisfaction of solving a complex design puzzle. I found myself talking more than I usually do, but he was such a good listener. He'd nod, ask smart questions, and I felt seen, heard, understood. He, in turn, told me a little about himself. He was finishing up a degree in kinesiology. He said he'd started out as just a guy who liked to lift, but he fell in love with the science of it, the way the human body could adapt and change. He talked about an elderly client he'd helped regain mobility after a hip replacement, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. There was a depth to him that I had only guessed at before. Under the surface of the handsome, fit trainer was a smart, compassionate, and dedicated man, and I realized I wasn't just crushing on a handsome face or a great body. I was genuinely, deeply attracted to the person he was. Eventually, we noticed the lights in the gym dimming slightly, a subtle signal that it was nearing closing time again. "Guess I should let you get back to work," I said, a little reluctantly. I didn't want the conversation to end. "This is the best part of my work," he said quietly, and the intensity was back in his eyes. "But yeah, I should probably start shutting things down." We walked together toward the front of the gym. The comfortable silence fell between us again. But this time, it was filled with a new kind of energy, a sense of possibility. When we got to the locker room entrance, I stopped. "Well, thanks again, Alex, for the help, for everything." "Anytime, John," he said. He hesitated for a second, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, the same indecision I was feeling. Then he seemed to make up his mind. "Hey," he said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming less trainer-like and more personal. "I know this great little coffee shop a couple of blocks from here. It's quiet, not like this place. The coffee is way better than the sludge they have in the break room." He paused, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what was coming. "We should go sometime," he said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. "Talk about something other than architecture and rhomboids." It wasn't a question, but it was. It was an invitation, clear, direct, and unmistakable. He was asking me out. He was moving us out of the gym, out of his workplace and my routine, and into the real world. I felt a huge, stupid grin spread across my face. I couldn't have stopped it if I tried. All the doubt, all the anxiety of the past 2 days just melted away, replaced by a pure, uncomplicated rush of joy. "I would love that," I said, and my voice was steadier than I thought it would be. "He's great," he said, and his own smile widened, mirroring mine. "I'm free on Sunday afternoon." "Sunday works for me." "Hi." "Cool. I'll text you the details," he asked, pulling his phone out of his pocket. We exchanged numbers right there, my fingers slightly trembling as I typed his name into my phone. It felt like a momentous transaction, far more significant than just sharing a few digits. "All right," he said, pocketing his phone. "I'll see you, John." "John, see you, Alex?" I watched him walk away toward the front desk, and then I pushed open the door to the locker room. This time, it was empty, and I was glad. I needed a moment to process what had just happened. I leaned my back against the cool metal of the lockers, right where he had leaned, and let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. The locker room incident had closed a door, creating a private, charged moment between us. But this was different. This was Alex actively opening a new one, and inviting me to walk through it with him. Under the surface of our gym-based acquaintance, something real had been growing, and on Sunday, we were finally going to see what it looked like in the light of day. The text message arrived on Friday night. About an hour after I got home, I was standing in my kitchen, staring into the fridge and pretending to be interested in its contents, when my phone buzzed on the counter. My heart jumped into my throat. I told myself to be cool, to not look desperate, so I waited a full 30 seconds before snatching it up. "Alex. Hey, John. It's Alex from the gym. Had a really good time talking today." I read the message 3 times. His name, Alex, glowed on the screen. It was real. This was happening. My thumbs felt fat and clumsy as I typed a reply.
Mate, hey Alex. I had a great time too. You completely fixed my rows, and my entire understanding of my own back.
I cringed as soon as I hit send. Too much? Too jokey? But a moment later, 3 dots appeared. He was typing, "Alex, haha, glad I could be of service. About that coffee. How's the daily grind on Palmer Street for you? Say, 2 p.m. on Sunday." Me, sounds perfect. See you then. Alex, looking forward to it. And that was it. A simple, efficient exchange that set the course for my entire weekend. Looking forward to it. The words replayed in my mind on a continuous loop. The calm, confident assertion. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't being coy. He was looking forward to seeing me. Saturday was a blur of nervous energy. I tried to work on the community center blueprints, but I kept sketching coffee cups in the margins. I tried to read a book, but I read the same page 4 times without absorbing a single word. I ended up cleaning my entire apartment from top to bottom, scrubbing surfaces that hadn't seen a sponge in years. It was the only way to channel the frantic, buzzing energy that had taken over my body. As I polished my faucets to a blinding shine, my mind drifted back. It had been so long. My last serious relationship had ended nearly 6 years ago. Mark was a lawyer, smart, ambitious, and exciting. We'd had 2 good years, but in the end, we were like 2 trains on parallel tracks. We were going in the same direction, but we were never going to meet. He wanted the big house in the suburbs, the cocktail parties, the power couple life. I just wanted a quiet space, a comfortable chair, and someone to share it with. The breakup was amicable, a mutual acknowledgement that we were trying to force a puzzle piece into the wrong spot, but it had left me feeling cautious. I'd gone on a few dates in the years since, but they all felt like job interviews. There was no spark, no easy comfort. Eventually, I just stopped trying. It was easier to be alone than to be lonely with someone else. But this thing with Alex felt different. It hadn't been sought out. It had just happened. An accidental collision in a locker room that had somehow knocked my entire world off its axis, and I was terrified of it. I was terrified of getting my hopes up, of being vulnerable again, of discovering that the man I'd been building up in my head wasn't real. What if he was boring? What if I was boring? At the gym, we had a built-in topic of conversation. What would we talk about without a weight rack between us? What if the easy chemistry we had under the fluorescent lights of Apex Fitness didn't translate into the real world? By Sunday morning, I was a mess. I changed my outfit 3 times. The jeans were too casual. The button-down shirt was too formal. I finally settled on a pair of dark olive chinos and a simple, soft navy sweater. It felt like me, or at least, a version of me I wanted him to meet. I looked in the mirror and told myself to breathe. He's just a guy. You're just a guy. It's just coffee. It was a terrible pep talk. I got to the daily grind 15 minutes early, my anxiety disguised as punctuality. It was exactly the kind of place I liked. Warm wood, soft lighting, the rich smell of coffee and baked goods hanging in the air. It was quiet, filled with people reading or tapping away on laptops. I chose a small table in the corner, one that gave me a clear view of the door, and immediately regretted it. Now, I had nothing to do but sit there and wait, my leg bouncing under the table with a mind of its own. At exactly 2 o'clock, the bell over the door chimed, and he walked in, my breath caught in my chest. Seeing him out of his gym clothes was a revelation. He was wearing a pair of well-worn jeans that fit him perfectly, and a simple, charcoal gray Henley that made his shoulders look even broader than they did in a tank top. His hair was a little damp, probably from a shower, and it curled just over his ears. He wasn't the formidable, graceful trainer Alex anymore. He was just Alex, a ridiculously, unbelievably handsome man who was scanning the room, looking for me. His eyes found mine, and that same warm, private smile I was coming to crave spread across his face. All my anxiety, all the nervous energy from the past 2 days, just evaporated. It was replaced by a simple, overwhelming feeling of happiness. He made his way over to my table. "Hey," he said, his voice that same low, calm rumble. "Hey," I replied, standing up. We had a slightly awkward moment where neither of us knew if we should shake hands or hug, so we just sort of smiled at each other until the moment passed. "You found it. Palmer Street's my secret weapon for good coffee," he said, dropping his jacket onto the back of the empty chair. "What can I get you?" "Oh, I can get it. I can—" "First date," he said, his eyes twinkling. "My treat. What do you want?" He said it so easily. First date. He named it, made it official, and the word hung in the air between us, shimmering with promise. "Just a black coffee is fine," I said, my voice a little thick. He returned a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs, placing one in front of me before sliding into the chair opposite. He wrapped his hands around his own mug, and I noticed them for the first time as just hands, not tools to correct my form. They were strong, capable hands, with clean, short nails and a light dusting of dark hair on the knuckles. "So," he began, taking a sip of his coffee, "the community center, you said you were trying to make it welcoming for everyone. How do you actually do that? With architecture. I mean—" And just like that, we were talking. The initial awkwardness was gone, replaced by the same easy rapport we'd found at the gym. I told him about using natural light and open spaces to make a building feel less institutional, about choosing durable but warm materials like wood instead of cold steel, about creating sightlines so parents could watch their kids from different areas. I found myself getting passionate, pulling a pen from my jacket pocket and sketching a rough layout on a napkin to explain a concept. He listened with that same intense focus he'd given my rowing form. He wasn't just hearing me, he was understanding. "So you're basically designing a feeling," he said, looking at my napkin sketch. "You're not just building rooms, you're building a sense of safety and community." "Exactly," I said, surprised and thrilled that he'd distilled it so perfectly. "That's it, exactly." He then talked about his kinesiology classes, and it was my turn to be captivated. He spoke about the elegant complexity of the human body, the way muscles and nerves communicated, the incredible resilience of the system. He wasn't just a guy who liked to lift, he was a scholar of the human machine. He wanted to open his own physical therapy clinic someday, focusing on rehabilitation for people who felt their bodies had betrayed them through injury or illness. He wanted to give them their lives back. But the title of the chapter I was writing in my head was More Than Muscle, and here it was, in reality. This man was so much more than the perfect physique I had admired from afar. He was driven, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. The physical attraction I felt was still there, a constant, humming undercurrent, but it was now being overlaid with something deeper, richer, and far more compelling. Genuine admiration, but it was now being overlaid with something deeper, richer, and far more compelling. Genuine admiration, but it was now being overlaid with something deeper, richer, and far more compelling. Genuine admiration. We talked about our families. He told me about his younger sister who was in vet school, and his parents, both teachers, who lived in a small town, a few hours north. He described them with a simple, uncomplicated affection that I envied. I told him about my own parents, retired and living in Arizona, and my older brother in Seattle. I explained how we were a family that loved each other from a distance, through phone calls and holiday cards. "It must get lonely sometimes," he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, offered with gentle empathy. I just nodded, taking a sip of coffee. I wasn't used to people seeing that part of me so clearly. "It has its moments," I admitted. "It's one of the reasons I like a city this big. You can be anonymous when you want to be, but sometimes you just feel anonymous all the time." I get that, he said, his eyes soft. When I first moved here for school, I felt like a ghost for the first 6 months. The conversation drifted. We talked about movies. He was a sci-fi nerd. Books. I was a sucker for historical fiction and travel. We both wanted to see Italy. We discovered we had a shared secret love for terrible 80s music. For 2 hours, we built a bridge of shared tastes and different experiences. And with every new plank laid, I felt more and more secure, more and more certain, feeling braver. I decided to be honest. You know, I said, I was really nervous about this. He smiled. Me too. Me too. Really, I asked, surprised. You seem like you have it all together. He let out a short laugh. That's my trainer voice. Years of practice. Inside. I was trying to figure out if you'd think I was just some dumb jock who couldn't talk about anything but protein shakes. Never, I said quickly. Maybe too quickly. I never thought that. Good, he said, his smile softening. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against the back of my hand. It was a fleeting touch, barely there, but it sent a jolt straight up my arm, because I was pretty sure you weren't just a guy who hides in the corner of the gym. His gaze held mine, and in that moment, the rest of the coffee shop faded away. It felt like the locker room all over again, a private, silent space created just for us. We stayed until the barista started pointedly wiping down the tables around us. As we stepped outside, the afternoon sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the street. The air was cool and crisp. My apartment's just a few blocks this way, I said, gesturing down the street. I'll walk you, he said, falling into step beside me. The walk was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with the unspoken energy of the afternoon we'd just shared. When we reached the front steps of my building, I turned to face him, a familiar sense of first-date dread creeping in. This was the moment, the awkward goodbye. Well, I started fumbling for my keys. I had a really, really great time. Alex. Me too, John, he said, and he stepped a little closer, closing the space between us. Better than I even expected. He looked at my mouth, then back to my eyes. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. He lifted his hand and gently cupped my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. The gesture was so tender, so confident, it made my knees feel weak. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I could only nod, my throat too tight for words. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, but I didn't want to. I wanted this more than anything. His lips met mine, and it was 1,000 times better than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't a hard, demanding kiss. It was soft, questioning, and incredibly warm. It was a kiss that tasted faintly of coffee and overwhelmingly of rightness. It was a confirmation, a beginning, all the loneliness, all the years of feeling like I was on the outside looking in, just melted away in the simple, perfect pressure of his mouth on mine. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine for a second. I could feel his breath on my skin. I could feel his breath on my skin. Wow, I breathed out. He chuckled softly. Yeah, wow. He stepped back, his eyes shining. I'll call you, he said. It wasn't a line, it was a promise. Okay, I managed to say. I watched him walk down the street until he turned the corner. Then I turned, fumbled my key into the lock, and went inside. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, bringing my fingers up to touch my lips. They were still tingling, and my apartment, the one I had scrubbed clean out of anxiety, no longer felt like an empty waiting room. For the first time in a very long time, it felt like home, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I wouldn't be sharing it alone for much longer. The phone call came on Monday evening. I was pacing around my living room, trying to convince myself that my phone hadn't died, when it finally rang, lighting up with his name. I snatched it up, my voice coming out a little too breathless. Hello? Is this the brilliant architect who's been moonlighting as a napkin artist? Alex's voice was warm and teasing, and I felt a goofy smile spread across my face. Depends, I said, leaning against the wall. Is this the kinesiologist who thinks 80s power ballads are a legitimate musical genre? He laughed, a rich, happy sound that I already felt I couldn't get enough of. Guilty. Listen, I know I'm supposed to wait 3 days or whatever the stupid rule is, but I didn't want to. I had a really great time yesterday. John. Me too. Alex. I said, my voice softening. Really? So, I'm not going to be coy. I want to see you again, soon. Are you busy on Wednesday? I was thinking we could skip the coffee and go straight for a meal. I make a pretty mean chicken parmesan. My heart swelled. The directness, the lack of games, it was like a breath of fresh air. I think I could be persuaded to judge your chicken parmesan, I said. My place or yours? That Wednesday night turned into a Thursday morning coffee that led to a Saturday hike on a trail Alex loved, a winding path that overlooked the city. I, who considered the escalator at the mall a strenuous climb, found myself breathless, but not just from the exertion. It was from watching him. He moved through the woods with the same easy grace he had in the gym, pointing out different types of trees. His face lit up with a simple joy that was infectious. He'd wait for me at the crest of a hill, his hand outstretched to help me up the last few feet, and the simple contact felt more intimate than the kiss we'd shared. The weeks that followed were a montage of firsts. The first time we cooked together in my kitchen, bumping into each other in the small space, laughing as I accidentally coated the counter in flour. The first time he brought me to a loud, crowded bar to meet two of his friends from school, who, to my immense relief, were just as warm and down-to-earth as he was. They welcomed me into their circle without question, teasing Alex about how he hadn't shut up about me for a week. The first time we just sat on my couch on a rainy Sunday, reading our own books in a comfortable, shared silence that felt more profound than any conversation. Our dynamic at the gym shifted too. It became our private joke. I'd be struggling on the leg press, and I'd catch his eye from across the room. He'd give me a subtle wink, and I'd suddenly find the strength for one more set. It was no longer a place of longing and nervous observation. It was the place where it all started, and seeing him there, in his element, now felt like coming home. He never pushed, he never asked for more than I was ready to give. He seemed to understand, without me ever having to say it, that my heart was a cautious, locked-up sort of place. He just waited, patiently, with a quiet confidence that made me feel safer than I had in years. He was showing me a different kind of strength, not the kind that lifts heavy weights, but the kind that holds space for someone, the kind that is patient and steady and unwavering. And then, about 2 months in, that strength was put to the test. The community center project, my professional baby for the last year, hit a brick wall. A new city council member, on a crusade to cut municipal spending, had put my project on the chopping block. Suddenly, a year of my life, all those late nights and intricate plans, was in jeopardy. The news hit me like a physical blow. My old habits kicked in immediately. I retreated. I crawled into the shell I had built for myself years ago. When Alex called that night, I was short with him. "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm just swamped with work. Can I call you back?" "Everything okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Yeah, fine. Just a deadline." I lied. I didn't call him back. I sat at my drafting table until 2 a.m., staring at the blueprints, a bitter, angry knot tightening in my stomach. I felt like a failure. The next day was the same. I ignored a text from him, telling myself I needed to focus, that I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was all right. This was my problem, and I would solve it alone. That's how I'd always operated. On the second night of my self-imposed exile, there was a knock on my door. I ignored it. It had to be a delivery for a neighbor. But then the knock came again, firmer this time. "John, it's me. I know you're in there." It was Alex. My stomach dropped. I didn't want him to see me like this, defeated, miserable, angry, but he didn't go away. "I'm not leaving until you open the door," he said, his voice calm but resolute, easily carrying through the wood. "I've got pizza."
Defeated.
I dragged myself to the door and opened it. He was standing there, holding 2 pizza boxes, and his face was a mask of gentle concern. He didn't look angry that I'd been ignoring him. He just looked worried. "Rough couple of days?" he asked softly. I just nodded, my throat tight. I couldn't meet his eyes. He walked past me into the apartment, set the pizzas down on the coffee table, and then turned back to me. He took my hands in his. "Hey," he said, forcing me to look at him. "You don't have to do this alone." And that was it. The dam broke, the composure I had been clinging to just crumbled. I told him everything, the city council, the budget cuts, the feeling that all my work was for nothing. I paced my living room, ranting about politics and bureaucracy, my voice thick with frustration and unshed tears. Alex just listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cheap platitudes or easy solutions. He just sat on the couch, his eyes following me, his presence a solid, grounding anchor in the storm of my anxiety. When I finally ran out of words and sank onto the armchair opposite him, exhausted, he just nodded slowly. "That sounds awful," he said simply. "I'm so sorry you're going through that." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Not "you'll figure it out" or "it will be okay," just an acknowledgement of my pain. "I just feel like such a failure," I mumbled, staring at the floor. "John, look at me," he said. I lifted my head. "You are the furthest thing from a failure I have ever met. I've seen the way you work. I've heard the passion in your voice when you talk about that place. Your worth isn't tied to some politician's budget. Your worth is in the care, the brilliance, and the heart you put into that design. That's real. They can't take that away from you." Tears pricked my eyes. He saw me. He saw my value, separate from my success or failure. In that moment, he was holding me up, not with his powerful arms, but with his unwavering belief in me. It was a strength I had never experienced before, the strength of a true partner. I went over to the couch and he wrapped his arms around me, and I just let myself be held, breathing in the scent of him, and feeling the tension finally begin to seep out of my bones. We ate pizza on the floor and he told me stupid jokes until I was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in days. He didn't fix my problem, but he held my hand while I faced it, and that made all the difference. A few weeks later, after a series of stressful meetings and revised plans, the project was saved, albeit with a smaller budget. It was a compromise, but it was a victory, and I knew I wouldn't have had the fight in me to see it through if it hadn't been for Alex. But it was a victory, and I knew I wouldn't have had the fight in me to see it through. Our relationship settled into a new kind of normal after that. The last of my walls had come down. I had let him see me at my worst, and he hadn't run. He'd stayed. He'd brought pizza. One morning, he was getting ready to leave my apartment for an early client. He'd started keeping a toothbrush and a change of clothes at my place. It had happened so naturally, we never even discussed it. As he was tying his shoes at the door, I did something I hadn't planned. I walked to the small bowl by the door where I keep my keys, took my spare apartment key off the ring, and walked back to him. He looked up as I held it out to him. His eyes went from the key to my face, a question in them. "You should have this," I said, my voice steady, "so you don't have to knock any more." He took the key from my palm, his fingers warm against mine. He looked at it for a long moment, the little piece of brass seeming to hold a world of meaning. When he looked back up at me, his eyes were shining. "John," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't have to say anything else. I understood. He leaned in and gave me a long, deep kiss that was full of love and promises. "I love you," he whispered against my lips. "I love you too," I said, and the words felt like the most natural, truest thing I had ever said. A few nights later, we were back where it all began. We'd worked out together, an easy, companionable rhythm of spotting each other and sharing weights. Now, we were in the locker room. It was late, and just like that first night, it was empty. But this time, the silence wasn't tense or awkward. It was comfortable, peaceful. I watched him as he pulled a clean t-shirt over his head, the muscles in his back moving under his skin. It was the same body I had been so intimidated by, the same body I had admired from afar for months. But now, it was just a part of the man I loved, the man who knew my fears, who had seen me at my most vulnerable, who held my key in his pocket. "What are you smiling at?" he asked, catching my eye in the mirror. I walked over to him, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind and resting my chin on his shoulder. "I was just thinking about this room," I said, "about that first night." I said. He turned in my arms to face me, his hands coming up to cup my face. The night my very professional give the client some privacy move was a complete and total sham. I laughed. "A sham?" "A total sham," he confirmed, a grin spreading across his face. "My boss had already left. I saw you walk in here, and I couldn't make myself leave. I told myself I was just waiting to wipe down one last machine, but I was just waiting for you. When you came out of that shower, my heart just about exploded. Closing that door was the bravest and most terrified I've ever been." I stared at him, my heart swelling all over again. "All this time," I said, "I thought I was the only one who was terrified." "We were both terrified," he said softly. "But look at us now." He was right. I looked around the empty locker room. It wasn't a place of anxiety anymore. It was just a room where a door had been closed, and a whole new world had been opened. "You know," I said, looking back at him for a while, "I thought my life was a finished blueprint. All the rooms were designed, all the walls were up. And now? He prompted gently. Tuan, now, I said, leaning in to kiss him. I realize it was just the foundation. You're the one who's helping me build the rest. We walked out of the locker room and through the quiet, darkened gym, hand in hand, as the front door of Apex Fitness clicked shut behind us. I knew it wasn't an ending. It was just closing time. Outside, the city lights twinkled, and the future felt as bright and limitless as the night sky. We had found a different kind of strength in each other, and together, we were just getting started,